Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Small Business Stories. You know me, your host, Dr. LL, and every week we bring to you amazing guests. Now, this guest, we've had some back and forth, so I'm so excited to finally have her on the show. This is Leisa Peterson. She is the founder of wealthclinic.com, and it's all about how we change our mindset in and around money. She's got The Mindful Millionaire as a book. She has The Money Catalyst as a book and podcasts by the same name and YouTube channels. We're going to put all those links in the thing. Enough of that. Leisa, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for this.
Well, it's fantastic because so many people have a weird relationship with money. And we're going to get into some of that. But I like to start the podcast off for those that are listening in their car or on a run or, whatever it is that they're doing, and they don't have the full visual experience. So please, for our guests that have the auditory only experience, share whatever you want about how you are showing up, your look, your room, your anything, just to help paint a little bit of the picture.
Yeah, I am here in Sedona, Arizona, looking at Thunder Mountain as we speak on this beautiful blue sky day. And I am just so happy to be spending time with you and with your listeners. I know this is going to be a fabulous conversation.
Excellent. We're going to get right into it. Next question I ask, not about your business and your expertise. We all know your financial analysis, capabilities, your MBA, all that. What are you, Leisa, personally really, really good at? Like your superpower?
The superpower is 100% about finding the golden thread that helps people to understand what is the energy or the through line of money in their lives. So it's like starting early in life, what caused us to believe the things that we do. So I help people get to the bottom of that so that they can create more abundance and less scarcity patterns in their lives. That's what I live for.
Oh, I can't wait because I have had a scarcity pattern forever. Now, not that I expect you to be able to do any wonders with me. I think I'm almost a lost cause. But
Never.
in the span of a podcast, we're not getting into that. Let's first set some of the context in and around money generally, where we are with the economy, some of the macro drivers now, some of the changes, some of the things that are going on. We're just coming out of that era of right, $12 for a dozen eggs. Now, oh, it's only 9 now where we are in New Jersey. Bargain, right? Talk to us about what you're seeing in some of the pressures or some of the positive opportunities regarding money.
One of the things that people don't always understand, but I think it's helpful to point out, is something I learned back in 1992 when I was getting my MBA. And I'll never forget this day. I was sitting there listening to the finance professor describe what America, the United States, had done around the currency back in 1971, which was that they had decided to go off of the gold standard. And that was, here I was in 91 hearing about a decision that was made 20 years before. And yet I knew that that was a serious, serious problem because what he was talking about is what is known as fiat currency. And to make this really basic, it would be like each of us have, if we all had our own fiat currencies, we would just go over to the printer and we would print out money whenever we needed it. That's fiat currency. The country basically has fiat currency, meaning it can print money, keep it super simple anytime they want. And there's no backing, there's no standard behind it. So it used to be there was a certain amount of gold that was kept in, let's say, Fort Knox, right? Kept in a secure vault. And the currency was tied to how much gold we had. When they went off of that, it created a whole problem that we are dealing with today, which one of the effects of that is inflation, because when you don't back your currency on gold, which is pretty much what's happened all around the world, countries can make decisions that may help them politically or what have you. But most of the time, 99% of the time, decisions about money are not helping you and me. Like they're not oriented to helping us. And so one of the problems you're dealing with, and you were talking about eggs, is fiat currency kind of going out of control. And one of the effects that we all deal with is something like inflation, but there's a lot of other problems. And if we want to even simplify further, we could say that a lot of the problems we're having in the United States today are built off of fiat currency being such a problem. Like the problems that we have with some people having a lot of money and then a lot of people struggling and, to pay their bills, like all of it could be deduced very simply to the currency. So I just say that because I knew back then it was a problem, and it would take us all these years later, now 30, right? That'd be 25 plus 10. Yeah, like 35 years later, it took for us to really be feeling the effects in many, many different ways in this country. And so it's not something you and I can control, but I will say it is important to understand it so that we don't just blame it on like a political party or a politician. It's not that simple.
Ooh, that is the first time I've heard that explanation. Now, I'm not a money gal, that's not my lane, but I am just fascinated by hearing this. And I'm thinking so many different parallels. Since we're talking about money and sort of the long-term ripple effect, is it fair to extrapolate and say that whatever we grew up around with respect to ideologies and attitudes around money, that long-term effect, that long tail might take decades until we start experiencing it and seeing it and I guess really acting upon it? Is that fair? Is that kind of the relationship with money?
Yeah, yeah, you're taking what I said about like fiat currency, but you're actually, to me, what you're saying is, could this also apply to the lives we lead, like decisions that were made or experiences that we had when we were a child that may not, we may not even know that it even happened. We can barely remember, and yet here we are as adults making decisions totally oriented to that one event that happened to us when we were children.
And I'm thinking that that must be it, again, without going into a psychology session, or for some of our listeners, like, oh, that's too woo woo. Well, listeners, you know this show. We go woo woo sometimes, we go alt left, we go alt right, we go down the middle, we take every path, right? And respect that people have different opinions and ideas. And that's why we have this show, to air them out and talk about things, because it might create some new ideas, new patterns of thinking, which is exactly the whole point of the show, so that people can learn something, do something ideally in a more positive direction. Okay, that's it. Now, giving us this big picture and lesson in and around money and the impact it has at the macro level. So we're talking federal. With our deficit, I don't even know where it is now, probably north of 30 trillion. I mean, there's so many zeros,
Yeah.
it almost doesn't matter.
36 trillion.
So how is that affecting us at a local and micro, like individual level now? And how is this large deficit going to affect us, let's just say maybe 20 years from now, for those of us that are Gen X and we're going to be, ideally making it to our 80s in 20 years from now? What's going on with that? Does it affect us, or it's not our problem? It's generations from now.
No, it affects us. We're kind of in the phase, we're in the beginning phase of feeling the effects of it more than it has ever been felt in our lifetime. And the only times where there have been similarities to what's happening would be the lead up to the Great Depression. Like there are a lot of economic metrics that are tracked that haven't occurred that now, and they occurred back in the 1920s and early 30s in this country. So we are feeling the impact in inflation. We're feeling the impact in political instability. We're feeling the impact in the divisiveness that often happens, where people get into really extreme sort of camps of thoughts and beliefs. And it's having an effect on our lives, because probably more than anything else, it would be like the cost of education for anyone who's preparing to send a child to college, for example. When I was in school in college in the late 80s and early 90s, like the costs were so low and so manageable, right? And yet we've just seen like 100%, 100, another 100%. Like it's just those sorts of things create instability because it becomes harder and harder to be able to go from, maybe like I did, I grew up in a home with very little. My parents didn't have a college education. Being able to get a college education back then was possible, but now it becomes harder and harder for people to like break ranks, if you will, to actually go upward, have upward mobility. You may have seen in the news, a lot of times there are articles being written right now, the idea that the American dream is over because it's not as accessible for people to build wealth as it would have been maybe 20 years ago. Of course, we're always going to have those exceptions, but you don't want building wealth to be an exceptional experience. You want it to be something that more people have the opportunity. And that's the thought, is that's going away with what we're experiencing. Also, I think we're going into a time where, debt, I was looking at some recent statistics, over 75% of Americans are in debt in some form. And when you have a society that doesn't run without those sorts of debt numbers, you really have to question, like, is this benefiting all of us? And like, how do we get control of this problem? But the individuals are simply a reflection of the government also overspending. So people are overspending. And when I say overspending, that's not a judgment call, because it could sound that way. Some people have no choice with their jobs and the situations they're in, they have to rely on debt to be able to pay the bills. And then of course, I think as a country, one of the things that we're going to start noticing is we're going to have to be making choices. Many people will be making choices of like, what can I have and what do I have to go without? And maybe more than ever before. So that's some of the stuff that I think we're going to be dealing with. And I think we're at the beginning of it. And that, when I talk to people about money, I don't want to paint a dire situation, because that's not the case. But I do want people to understand that this isn't their imagination, that I need them to be paying more attention and being more careful, because shocks happen quite quickly. People know AI could change the landscape for a lot of jobs. We want to have longer and fatter, emergency savings accounts. We want to be more careful about the risk that we're taking in our stock market investing, for example. We could talk about that for days. Like, we do want to be more cautious in our approach right now when we're entering a phase like this, because anything could happen, and we want to make sure that we're taking good care of ourselves, even if the proverbial like SHIT hits the fan. Like, we want to be prepared for that just in case.
Oh, there's so many things. So, okay, like where do I even begin to attack this? As I said, I'm not a money gal, but I follow and look at trends. So there's a couple of things. As you said, we're entering into that 100-year, that century cycle. Again, back to economic hardships. The Great Depression, of course, was just catastrophic for so many people. And you see so many of those signs, even the multiple recessions we've had. And I personally think the media is hiding an existing recession. We're just calling it something different. And we see some of these patterns, like you said, people need to be more conscious of their choices. A couple of things that I was researching in preparation for our podcast here. The Big Mac Index. So the number of Big Macs being purchased, again, not so scientific, okay, maybe the
I
Wall
love it.
folks won't do it, but Big Macs going down as far as the numbers purchased. Number of child Happy Meals going way up, being purchased by adults. Lipstick sales at the drugstore going way up, which is again usually a recession economic indicator. Women want to feel good and just can't spend on something big, so we buy drugstore lipstick. And hemlines, when hemlines go down, we're preparing for, we need more like warmth and cozy and all of this sort of thing. And hemlines are way down. So what do you think of all of that? Is that just nonsense, or does it tie to what your real like shtick is here with the mindful millionaire and mindset?
Yeah, I think that those trends are very, very fascinating and helpful for us to say, yeah, this is really happening. And I would agree with you. I think that the multinational corporations that control media and so on and so forth often are tied to products being sold. So they don't want us to think that we're in a recession because they know that that can contribute to the recession. So there's a bit of hiding information that is definitely happening right now. So yeah, I think that those are all true. Like the lipstick one kills me because I think to myself, like, you know, brighter lipstick, like there's probably a whole bunch of different things that could happen that women don't even realize they're going into a scarcity pattern. And it's been triggered by some things that are happening at the grocery store or with their job, or maybe, concerned about what's happening with money. And so they start to have these certain behaviors. And I think that with tying it into the work that I do, what I've seen, because I've been working with people in money for like 30 plus years now, is that the more conscious we become about the patterns we have to situations happening in the outer world. So it's like, what do we do with that information? So the more we understand what we do with that information, the more likely it is that we're going to make good, solid decisions for ourselves. But if we do what a lot of people do, which is go into freezing or fawning when information's coming in, it makes us uncomfortable. And so we just do nothing. We kind of just, stay where we're at. Or go into fear modes, which would be even worse. There is data that says that the human mind, when it is confronted with any sort of thought, not enoughness, the brain actually will decrease in its capacity, and you can lose as much as 12 points of IQ in those moments and ultimately make really crappy decisions. Because 12 points of IQ would be similar to staying up, having no sleep, which most of us are not good at doing. So like no sleep whatsoever, and then going to work the next day with no sleep and seeing how you perform. That would be typically similar to like a 12-point loss in IQ. That's what we end up doing just naturally the minute we think there's not enough. I'm not enough. There's not enough. Like we trigger that response. And so I'm guessing that a lot of what those trends are doing is they found a way to quantify what happens to people when they go into scarcity. So they buy lipstick, or they, do these things. They buy generic brands, right? Rather than the more expensive brands. Like all sorts of behaviors happen. And those aren't the serious ones. The serious ones would be like, the market is falling and we go into our stock market account and we sell everything at like the bottom. That would be a scarcity decision, because all the data says, please, please, please don't sell. You're going to sell at the bottom and then buy when it gets back up. And that's the worst investment strategy. That would be another example.
Now, I'm surprised on the latter, on the scarcity example, because as I'm talking, it's really easy to be able to talk about your own behaviors and patterns, right? And getting ready for this, I was thinking like, well, what are they? And I've had to analyze them. Like a lot of folks, had a lot of stress lately, this, that, have always had this like scarcity mindset and with finances and things. And when I get triggered, I know I need to do a couple of things. So in my stress moments, I'm one of those eaters. So I'm not a mindful eater. Now, of course, I'm trying to become that, fix everything, right, Lisa? But not there. And so I've learned to try to get under control. Like, Loralyn, why are you eating? You hungry? No, you're stressed. Well, that's stupid. Put the food away. Even though the food is healthy, might be grapes, granola, this, that, but after a while, right? It starts to show you can't eat that much. And then it's the same thing with on the financial triggers. I might get with my corporation, a bill, a this, that, a tax assessment, a new thing, creates stress. And then I know I've got to put my money and attention into that thing. So I don't have the latitude to buy the thing I really want. So I will go to the drugstore, like, oh, buy another stupid, like cheap lipstick or something, just because like I need something to overcome the stress that says, oh, I'm not losing, I'm still winning. I can still do this. I can still be in the game. And I think this is normal, right?
Yeah, it's totally normal. And you bring up a good point that like it's one thing to go buy the lipstick, but I mean, I'll go back to my history. And I learned this from my mom. When she was stressed or unhappy, she would go to like the clothing store or even the thrift shop. And I mean, she would buy things that she couldn't afford. And I learned from a young age that like every like the what is it, shopping comfort, like there was some kind of, you get
Retail
that
therapy.
dopamine, retail therapy, yeah, you get that like dopamine and you're sad and now you feel better and you just have to like buy things. Um and once in a while it's not a problem, but many of us will notice that we spend or we eat or we have these other or we drink, like we do that to try and feel better, and yet it doesn't really, it's very very temporary. And the problem is that like something like spending more money than we want to be spending isn't temporary, because we got to live with that for like long time, especially if we get into debt. So there's so many, it's never about being judgmental to yourself, because I think that can create a whole other series of problems, but it's about being like so loving about yourself. Like to me, some of my greatest realizations have come from realizing these patterns and then realizing them with love and with compassion. And I'll give you a very very personal quick story. My mom got diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer when she was younger than me. So she got diagnosed, I think, at 57. Um, and as you can imagine, I mean, she was this young, vital woman. Like, I just can't even believe it now that I'm 58, that she went through this at my age, and she was going through, treatment after treatment after treatment. And she was trying so hard to stay alive. And when it came down to her last few days of life, she was in a hospice home and I was there taking care of her. But I was in so much trauma, and it's embarrassing to say this, but that's why I need to share this, is I remember getting in my car, leaving her and driving to the closest mall and telling the hospice nurse, when the doctor comes, like I want to talk to him, so please call me so that I can come back. It wasn't that far away. So I'll never forget, I was trying on clothing in a in a shopping in a store, and they called me to say, the doctor's come in, you'll probably want to head back then. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror thinking, there's a problem here. Like, why would my mom had less than 24 hours to live and I'm shopping at the store. And when it wasn't years later when I realized, because I think I didn't stop that pattern. I didn't even know what was happening. I was just trying to get away from these bad feelings inside of myself. And it was years later when I was doing this work and learning about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a pattern. My mom had taught me that pattern. It was playing out even to her last day, when I would have wanted to just be holding her hand and being with her, but I couldn't deal with the feelings inside of myself, that the only thing that could make me feel better was shopping and spending money. And I came up with this whole convoluted idea of why I needed those clothes, which just trips me out. But this is what, so what did I do when I figured it out? I was like, I just showered myself with love for like, here's this young woman who's losing her mom. It makes me emotional. And the only way that she had been taught to deal with her feelings was shopping. And I just wanted her to know, this younger part of me, that it was okay, that I wasn't going to give her a hard time, that I understood that she never had the resources given to her to learn how to do this better, and that I could I could reparent myself. And that's a lot of the work that I do with my coaching clients, is helping them create new patterns and new relationships with themselves and money, which is 100% what we're talking about here. So I hope that helps people.
That's a lot. And like I said, I really like big heart appreciate you sharing that because it really unravels all of the patterns. I can see that, in panic, right? You're going out there just to escape the reality of what was happening. And in some ways, maybe you were trying to mimic and emulate what your mother would have done and just reinforcing those patterns that this is what needs to be done at this time and just finding ways to cope. But look how far you've come on the other side now, where you're showing the rest of us how to manage our mindset around money, to look at scarcity, but be realistic about it and look ahead with positivity, manage all of that. I've read, like I said, your book and seen some of your sites. I also want to bring it back around because you said that was a big epiphany in your life. You also talked about a horrendous, really, experience, I guess 2012, 2013, where you were in a clinic and a gentleman came in with a gun and said, "You may want to leave now." What would you
Yeah.
like to share about that and how that changed your mindset and your trajectory?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was at one of these horrific shootings that we, read about in the newspaper or like on the internet. And at that time, I was a financial advisor, and I had been thinking that I wanted to start doing the work that I do today, but I was scared about it, and I didn't know how I was going to get benefits or take care of my family because I was the primary breadwinner. And then in walks this man with a gun and goes on a shooting rampage. Uh, that I lived through, but my doctor was not so fortunate. He was killed. Other people were shot, and ultimately the man shot and killed himself. And when I was trying to get out of this third floor of this doctor's building, um, I really ended up having this conversation with God. Like, I realized that I could die in any second, and how easy it is for us to lose our lives with very unexpectedly. And in that moment, I was like, if I live through this experience, I am going to walk away from the stability and the security that I have in my career. And I'm going to do something that my heart is telling me to do, which is to use all these years of knowledge and experience and wealth building and understanding money to like teach people about these relationships inside of their heads and then also in their wallets. I'll also say, and I always I dedicate my work and my efforts to this wonderful doctor that I had gotten to know over a period of time, and he had helped me a lot. But like, when I first started this business, I had no idea what I was doing. I could barely use Facebook, much less run an internet based business or have a podcast or have a YouTube channel. Like, my kids were like, "Mom, we have to help you use your phone. How are you going to do this thing?" And so, here we are, what, 12 years, almost 12 years later, 11 and a half years later. And early on, I said, I want to impact like 1 million people's lives through this work. And somewhere, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that like, not only had I done that original goal, like it was far bigger than that, like between my podcast downloads and my YouTube and all the different things that I've been involved in and all the interviews I've been on, I was like, we're talking like 10 million people, like crazy things that, who nobody gave me permission. Nobody invited me to do this. I just had this urge deep, deep, deep inside that maybe my struggles and my difficulties could actually mean something for others. And I'm grateful that I took that horrible situation and I channeled my life in a positive way.
And isn't, though, that the essence of entrepreneurship, when you align your purpose with your passion?
Mm-hmm.
Right, I mean, that's where you at, and what you've done. And I want to make a comment too about, saying that your children are like, but mom, you don't know how to use your phone. Same thing. I have two stepchildren, and I think we're about the same age here, Lisa, and they're like, oh, da, 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 you don't hear that. I'm like, no, 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 you're going to learn from me how you do a podcast, how you do this, how you set this up, how you live stream, how you blah 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 blah. Watch me, here we go, right? Learning curve, I mean, it hasn't stopped. It's still going up and up and up. Seems to be going like straight up. It doesn't even like slope anymore. And that's the thing. Now I'm there and I'm like, and what would you like to know? Because I can, because I've had to learn it, because you have to. It's either that or you pay somebody to maybe sort of kind of do it, but probably not to your spec and the way that you want it anyway, or you figure it out yourself and you just get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, who do we become in the process of doing that? Like we become a totally different person because we feel like confident to like show up in the world in the way that it is today versus 20 years ago. I mean, the changes, I'm proud that I can speak internet and I can speak entrepreneurship and this language. And my daughter's now an entrepreneur and my son's still in college. And yeah, she does come to me on a regular basis because her business is growing so fast. And the questions that come up on a daily basis are something that all of my experience has really helped her. It's like we get to a certain place in life and then we hope that we can help our children go past us. And that's what's happening for her.
Oh, that's exciting for her too. I'm glad to hear that. And I do think it all starts with the intention, right, that you manifest. And at the beginning of the show, so folks don't know, when podcast people get on with their show and their guests and like blah blah blah, there's a little bit of the banter before the show starts and all this kind of thing. And for guests that are unaccustomed to podcasting, which is still a number of folks, it relaxes them. They get ready. Okay, not pros like Lisa here, who's been podcasting and that for a long time. But I always ask, is there something that you'd like to talk about or focus on that we can do a promotion? And Lisa just instantly answered, didn't blink an eye, and said, no, no, no. It's about, I want to help people. I want to be able to provide information that can help others. And I think it's that intentionality that does set you apart. If you're on that path, like you said, aligned your purpose, your passion, and you've got that positive, intention, the money will come. Now, to that end, what tip or tips can you offer our listeners about their mindset and their relationship with money?
The thing that you want to be thinking about if you want, let's say, more money, and most people do, they would love to have more money. So just first of all, be honest with yourself because that goes a long way. Because I think you make different decisions when you're honest with yourself. Like, I want more money and I'm willing to put the steps in place to do it. But once you've done that, the next step that you want to be thinking about is, do I feel worthy? Do I feel like I'm enough to have what it is I want? And, even I told the story about me being in the dressing room 24 years ago. Like, the point is not that this change of like, you go from, I don't feel like I'm worthy or I don't feel like I'm enough to, I feel like I'm $1 million. Woohoo. Like, please don't expect that to happen overnight. Please don't expect it to happen in a few weeks. Like, I write books that get people on the path to making the changes, but many of my clients, I mean, they may have been working with me for 10 years and they're still doing the work. They are still improving their mindset. This is not something that just happens overnight. You want to give yourself patience and be persistent. And the journey of like coming to the realization that you are enough, that you have incredible capabilities that you may or may not be giving yourself credit for. One of the reasons I think my daughter has been so successful in business from such an early age is she's an incredibly confident person. And when I study people who have had a lot of success, and I think this is where men often, because we live in a patriarchal society still, I think this is where men often, on average, make more money and do better, you know, in addition to anything systemic. It comes from a place of confidence. And so what I want everyone to be thinking about is that your journey with confidence in yourself is very, very, very important. And you don't get it overnight. If you don't feel confident, then you got to realize these are the areas, like write it out. These are the areas I'm really confident. These are the areas I really struggle. Beautiful. Celebrate where you're confident, focus on money making strategies in the areas that you're confident in, but also go over to the list of where you're not so confident and pick a few of those out and focus on, well, what's it going to take for me to be confident in these areas? And, you know, we were talking about this. I said, anyone can write to me and ask me a question, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So like, even if you get to the point where you're like, okay, these are the 3 areas that I want more confidence in, but I have absolutely no idea how to become more confident, maybe that's the question that you ask me in the follow-up to this email. You know, like, find someone who you think is going to stretch you and ask the question to them. Don't just try and figure this out by yourself.
As you were speaking and offering this advice, I was kind of hearing it in the voice of a middle-aged and seasoned person to another middle-aged seasoned person. Where I'm going to come and flip the switch is where you start to talk about your daughter, who represents, of course, a younger generation and all of that. I think that there's a level of overconfidence. So, for example, when I'm mentoring some young folks and entrepreneurs, they have bought into the yo-yo bros and Lambos whole thing, and they expect, yeah, I'm going to start off 250K. That's going to be my first year. I'm going to be a YouTube influencer. Fabulous. I'm going to get 1 million downloads in my first month. And they're like all about that. And then they're going, it didn't happen. What do I do? I'm like, well, it's not going to happen overnight. And then I wonder if it makes sense to continue to encourage them to be confident, or to say, let me pull back a bit. You need to go through maybe a few of the sort of bumps and machinations that life brings us until you level out and realize where you are without killing your confidence. Like, keep that safety net there, because you don't, of course, want people to fall. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think whenever we are thinking about making money, because that's where I feel like things, it's like the rubber hits the road, as they say, like everything can change. So going back to my daughter, I was thinking about the fact that she was not knowing she was starting a business, but fully engaged in creating content, which is what she does. You know, classic, like she's creating content on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok, but in a very specific genre and a very educational genre. She did it for 18 months without making any money, but she was increasing the number of people that were following and the opportunities that were coming. And every step of the way, it was a feedback loop that was like, what am I learning? What's working and what's not working? And she started to teach herself what it took to capture eyeballs, to get people's attention, to get them engaged. And every business is like this. Like, you can't just keep doing something that isn't working and expect it to work. And many times in business, I see this no matter what age we're at. Like, a lot of people do this where they will do things and think that, oh, I'm just not marketing it right, or I'm not doing this right, or I'm not doing that right. And there's probably a fundamental aspect of the business that they're missing, that if they keep doing it over and over again, nothing's going to change, and they need to change their approach. So I love when we're talking about money that oh, what is it? It's like there's a book written by Mike Michalowicz, The Pumpkin Plan. There's lots of different, and there's another one by a guy that I follow. It's like the $100 Startup. I love it when we get products to market very quickly and we put them out there over and over again, because it will give us a sense of like, is this working or is it not? Because you're right, for many different reasons, people can be overconfident and it comes back and really, really hurts them. And they lose a lot of time and money in the process. And so the quicker you're able to test your ideas and put things together and try them and not be afraid to fail, the faster we're going to find our pathway to like what does work.
Oh, yeah. And you had offered some moments of vulnerability in sharing things. I will do the same. I had read everything. Oh, don't do this, don't do that. I did it anyway. Not because, oh, I had such like huge hubris, like, oh God, it's going to work for me and it's not going to work for other people. You just can get so caught up in it that you don't even realize that it's happened. And then by then you're so invested, it's hard to disengage. Specifically in my business, I started off building what was then around the time of the pandemic starting, the world's first soft skills academy. God, everybody needs soft skills. Everybody's talking about it. This is a sure bet, right? It's on every article. Oh, Gen Z, boy, those freaking Zoomers, they don't have soft skills to save their lives, like nothing, right? Invested my retirement, mortgaged my home, whole thing, right? Burned the boats, went all in. Nobody wanted to pay for soft skills. And it took me a long time to come to the realization that, wow, that was a waste. I didn't pivot soon enough. I was doing the metrics, doing the things, all the articles were still there. It's like, well, it must be a go-to-market approach. Maybe I did it this way. Maybe I should try it this way, but still anchored in the idea that people would pay for soft skills training. Now, some people have made it work. I couldn't. And so it took a long time to disentangle myself from it. But like you said, the debt has not left me. I still have small business loans, my mortgage, and then the hole that's in my retirement because I tried to do this. So now I'm trying to figure out ways to undo that mess with respect to doing something different that I see is working, and then bringing and being much, much more mindful and aligned with what's happening in the time, and being more conservative about what I'm going to spend on to try to move it forward. So I learned the hard way, Leisa, is the bottom line.
Yes, you're not alone. You're not alone.
No.
I'm sharing wisdom after, 12 years in this business, but 30 years in different businesses that my husband and I have run. And there have been plenty of times where you have this, oh my gosh, like I didn't see it this way, but I now know, that this is the cost of learning. And I think that's why it's so important to even for us to share our stories, because a lot of people won't talk about the hardships or the difficulties or the importance of being very careful. Like I feel like when I started my business, coaching was just really taking off. And there were a lot of people out there that were just really happy to take your money, but didn't provide as much value back in relationship to the money that they charged. And I had to learn the hard way of like working my way through that some people have different values than I do. And it made me a better coach because I am very focused. If people give me money, I'm like, I just want you to feel so much value from this. Like that's what it did for me because I had the mistakes and I never want somebody to be in the same position that I was in.
Amen to that. And I also think people are uncomfortable talking about their failures. Everybody tries to pretend, right? We look at social media, curated micro slice of our lives, right? Oh, look at this shiny apple, perfectly shaped. And that, and if you rotate it around, right, it's all wormy and rotten on the other side, but that's not what we're presenting, right? Our outside face. And so I always think about that when, go to market and I'm like, I'm too old, don't care, filter's long gone, like this is where it is. Like you can't lie about what is and what isn't, right? There's facts. That's it. Take a look. You can see the numbers. Anyway, that's it. Lots of lessons learned. As we're wrapping up our show, Leisa, how can people find you or get in touch with you?
So if you want to get the first chapters of my book and check both of the books, check it out. Also a meditation that would help you look inside of your relationship with scarcity. I do it in a very woo-woo way. In this meditation, it takes you through the chakras. If you don't know what they are, I talk about the chakras and I teach people about money through the lens of chakras in the Mindful Millionaire book, my first book. But also, like I said, if you want to write me a question, then you can email me at lpeterson Peterson@wealthclinic.com. Happy to answer your questions or nudge you along. If you're like, oh, am I on the right track? Here's the details. Happy to give you my insights after being a business owner for 30 years and building, a millionaire wealth portfolio. Like there's a lot of people out there that will give you advice about things, but they may not have gotten to that level of success. So that's where my questions and comments come from. I'm a very conservative investor, but I've been successful even being conservative.
Whew. So thank you for making yourself available. Last question. Now, we talked about shopping, so I'm very curious what the answer is going to be to this. This is our signature question, 250 guests later. If we got to look into your closet and there was some footwear there, shoes, heels, hiking boots, whatever it is, something that personifies who you are, Leisa Peterson, right? It just represents and embodies all your personality. And when you wear them, you are fully aligned with who you are and you feel like unstoppable. What are we looking at?
Okay. That's such a great question. I do have one big splurge, and they would be the shoes I wear when I speak on keynote stages whenever possible. So they are Fendi, gorgeous shoes that I have never spent that much on shoes before. They could go in a museum. But the reason these shoes are really special is they are quite comfortable for heels, which I don't wear those very much, but they are like a rainbow of color of this, like it looks like a painting, both of them, and they're furry. So I'm trying to think like, oh, what is it when there's a type of fabric? I used to be in the fashion industry. Anyways, furry sounds very strange, but they're just multicolored and they look like a painting. And people, when they see them, they're just like, what is going on? So yeah, we always have it. There's always a conversation about these shoes.
Excellent. See, I knew we'd have things to like bond about. There it is, like, right? So with that, folks, thank you so much to Leisa Peterson, wealthclinic.com. And thank you to all of our listeners for dialing in today. Again, you can find her wealthclinic.com and we'll put everything else in the notes. Thank you so much, Leisa, for being such a gracious guest.
Thank you.